the host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
Welcome back to our rolling coverage here on SABC News. Our venue, the Nasrec Johannesburg Expo Centre, where the G20 Leaders Summit is underway. The plenary officially opened by G20 President and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. And what we can confirm to you now is that the Leaders Summit declaration has been adopted by consensus. So some breaking news. And with that, we say goodbye to our viewers on SABC2. But we do now continue with our continuing coverage here on SABC, the news channel 404. And I'm with my colleague Thulasizwe Sembalani. Big news coming out at the end there. A mistake or not, the Leaders Summit has been adopted by consensus.
Official now.
And DIRCO's public relations chief, Clayson Moniela, confirming that for us now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's now official. We now know that whether or not we were meant to hear that bit at the end of President Ramaphosa's speech, whatever the circumstances, the content thereof, there's no gainsaying it. It has been adopted and adopted by, in the words of President Ramaphosa, overwhelming consensus.
And what we need to now do is get our hands on this outcome document so that we can speak to the details of it. But before we do that, let's take you to our colleague Ayanda Nyati, who is standing by on the floor of the G20 Media Centre here at the Johannesburg Expo Centre.
Sherwin, thanks very much indeed. We're just outside that media center, basking in the African sun, and I suppose we have all the reasons to do exactly that, given the breaking news you've just shared around the adoption with an overwhelming consensus of that declaration. In fact, we'll just jump straight into the reaction, because that's certainly the big moment of the day. I'm standing now with Sello Hatang. He's part of the G20 Legacy Group, and we'll speak a bit more about, the kind of work that you do, Mr. Hatang. Thanks for speaking to us. But my goodness, this news that we've learned of, now confirmed by DIRCO, has come, I think, sooner than people perhaps would have expected.
But it says a lot about the country that we are. We are a country that knows how to negotiate. The very democracy that we're enjoying was a negotiated settlement. We are children of Nelson Mandela, the craftsman of ensuring that we negotiate well and we do what needs to be done right. And if we are following our ancestry, it tells you that even in this case, we're doing exactly what is expected of us. We're following the spirit of Nelson Mandela of saying, nothing is intractable. Everything can be resolved. And we've proved it again.
Yeah. Of course, part of what needs to happen now, as Sherwin mentioned, is we need to get into this document, get into the nuts and bolts of it. But another important issue, I'm sure, for your own interest is around making sure that this continues beyond at least this gathering, and this is where the G20 legacy comes in. Help us place how that happens, practically speaking, given the criticism that typically we move from one declaration to the other without there being some kind of golden thread throughout the presidencies.
So South Africa is, DIRCO needs to be commended for what has come up with, to say that we need to have a project that would then look beyond the event, capture the moment and say this is Africa's moment, not just South Africa's moment. But what does it mean practically in terms of understanding how the work was done? So we're building a hub where you can have the archive of this of G20 built onto it. Through that hub, we will then be taking it to communities through community dialogues that we're going to have. We're going to be convening these dialogues. But in addition, we're going to have exhibitions. These exhibitions will also be digital and the ones that are traveling around the country. So all these are things that we are building in so that we ensure that through collaboration with the private sector, government and communities, there's always understanding of what does it mean when you say you want to build a sustainable environment for someone who's still dependent on coal.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. The president also touched on the just energy transition. We know a big part of that is about making sure that nobody is left behind. Yeah. We know where this presidency is going after this. It's the United States. They've been very clear about how they feel about the issues that South Africa reckons are important, how difficult would it be, do you think, to make sure that the legacy that South Africa is trying to build here continues at least for the next presidency before we even think about the presidencies after that?
I think the big thing would be the test is on how multilateral bodies work, is that you can't have one body, one country being the one that determines, no, we're dropping everything. We are hoping that others will then say, actually, no, there needs to be sustaining some of these things so that they are about a different world that we want to build. You cannot build that world, imagine a different world when you are still doing the same things over. So I'm hoping that others will also apply some pressure to say, no, you don't drop everything. We need to continue with some of these elements. But the hub that we're building will be a monitor that says these are the things that we're committed to, how do they impact South Africans, and how are we doing with those?
Such an important discussion. Sello Hatang, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate those insights. Of course, as I mentioned, it's about, yes, what is taking place here, but how do you make sure that it lives beyond this particular gathering? But let's continue making sense of this moment, including the breaking news story about the adoption of that declaration. I'm joined now by SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena, who's been a woman about town, as they say, keeping a close eye on the developments, as it were. And we finally have that confirmation from the International Relations Department that, as we had been saying, that a declaration has been adopted.
I must commend the SABC. We've been doing a sterling job in terms of telling the real story of the summit and the G20 summit in terms of content and processes, and also ensuring that we get the story out there for our SABC viewers in all the platforms, radio, television, digital, and I often say trust the SABC. We indicated yesterday at around 1, that the Sherpas who spent almost 24 hours negotiating under the leadership of the Sous Sherpa, the Sherpa that is Zane Dango, the Minister of International Relations, there was progress. We didn't say there's a declaration because you say it when the leaders have agreed. We indicated that now it's up to the leaders to adopt or make changes. And the president today, on the first day of the summit, making an announcement that a declaration has been adopted by overwhelming consensus. And you could see the body language of the leaders when they arrived here, those who spoke during the doorstop, that they were determined to ensure that there's progress. And I think it captures the president's speech when he said, this is history. You can't derail history no matter who you are. We know who he was referring to just now. He was just diplomatic. And the African continent rallying behind South Africa, a member state, to ensure that this is a success. The South-South countries, heads off to the South-South countries, India, Brazil, and many others who supported South Africa in terms of ensuring that you have a declaration. This is quite important because the previous summits, there has been issues, particularly derailed by peace and security. And this morning I was saying the advantage, I was speaking to one of our colleagues, Peter Ndoro, that the issue of peace and security, it's not going to derail the conference this time around because South Africa has been friends with everybody. So South Africa will find a way to ensure that everybody agrees in terms of how we should move forward as the world on burning issues where you have conflicts, particularly when you look at the issue of Ukraine and Russia. South Africa does speak to Ukraine, South Africa does communicate with Russia, so South Africa was always going to find a middle ground. But I think above all, when the president mentioned important issues such as the what needs to be done going forward, the transformation of the financial institutions. When he spoke about Trevor Manuel's Africa report, I've been talking about that report quite a number of times because this is President Ramaphosa's administration's legacy by the finance minister appointing former Minister Manuel to come up with the report. The Professor Stiglitz's report, it's a gift for the world, particularly the UN, can use this report to address the challenges. I think one person who's happy in that room, I'm sure it's the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yesterday, he was really emphasizing a need for leaders to make progress and show leadership.
Yeah, that report that you speak about is one of 3 that South Africa commissioned. The other is the G20 at 20, which speaks to the idea of there being a legacy and the importance of multilateral institutions, the sustainable development goals. That's also going to be very important, right? Because it's one thing to get us to this point. It's another to ensure that the momentum that began here outlives the summit.
You are correct. Former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel, when I spoke to him, and Minister of Finance, Godongwana, they said these reports, now it's up to South Africa's leadership, those who are in office, to take these reports to the AU and lobby the AU to push for implementation, but go further beyond the AU borders to the South-South, push for this, go to the BRICS, go to the UN. And we know that it will happen if there's proper lobbying. And the minister, the former finance minister, saying at the AU meeting next year, put this forward. But we had the president, when he was addressing his counterparts from Africa yesterday, talking about the borrowers conference. You bring these financial institutions under one roof for development, and they come, they implement. You have Professor Stiglitz, his report, it's quite good. It's not about Africa and South Africa, it's about the world. Therefore, the UN can utilize this report, supporting the sustainable development goals, so that you reach that target of 2030. It's not going to be possible, but you can push because of the COVID that derailed us. And lastly, I think with the succession, we are a bit shaky because America is saying they are going to start from scratch. But you have the United Kingdom that is going to be the
part of the
Troika, and the United Kingdom having supported this declaration. You have 2+1 within the Troika. And clearly, come 2027, the UK will power ahead in the implementation. So I think, I don't know how to describe this diplomatic coup, but that's South Africa at its best. This reminds me the racism conference, when the conference in 2003 was about to collapse. The leadership then, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma as the Foreign Affairs Minister and President Mbeki as the leader, stayed the course. They didn't sleep to ensure that there was a declaration, even though, again, United States of America and Israel were not happy about the discussions. He even missed, going home, because that's the time when Omgov passed on. He stayed there, he didn't go. Mweletse Mbeki had to carry on. That's South Africa when coming to negotiations. And Ramaphosa has been there. He's a chief negotiator on island question. He's learned from the best. He has been part of the system.
The GNU might have given him some experience.
Yeah, but not even the GNU. The party he belongs to. Sometimes we have to be honest. The party that Ramaphosa belongs to is the party that agreed to sit on the table or at the table with the enemies. If South Africa could have done that, today, this South Africa, there's no way it can't utilize the very skills and expertise. There's one thing that came out of the president. He's talking about the G20 review. Former ambassador of South Africa in Geneva, they were driving that G20 review report. That's South Africa, because South Africa on multilateralism, committed country, but has got expertise. So you always go back and get those expertise, because that ambassador has retired, but still helping. So you are not running short of talent on the continent, the skill, the commitment. So let's see. But the critical issue here. I think South Africans are watching, Africans are watching. The Africans in the diaspora in Latin America are watching. The world is watching. Poorer nations are watching. They want to see the content of the declaration and see whether it speaks to their concerns. And they themselves now must also take over and pressurize their countries to implement.
Absolutely. Sophie Mokoena, always a pleasure. Thanks very much indeed. We'll continue, of course, making sense of this moment in history. Let's face it, the first G20 summit on African soil, and we're already told that a declaration has been adopted, not just with consensus, but an overwhelming consensus. And this is, of course, in the aftermath of very dramatic events in the lead up to this point, at least if the back and forth between Pretoria and Washington is anything to go by. If you ask me, there is a massive sigh of relief here. Of course, this is just the first phase of what we're hoping to get to the bottom of. What we now need to ascertain is what is in that declaration. The SABC News continues with our special broadcast live to you from the south of Johannesburg throughout the day.